So we come to question 4. Question 4, the first part, again, question 4 part A, asks us to explain the recognition rules for assets and liabilities according to the conceptual framework. Knowledge, and if you don't put that knowledge down, it's unforgivable. It really is unforgivable because, it's the first thing that you ever learn when you do your accounting. And of course, as you know, you recognize assets and liabilities if you can do so, and it gives faithful representation and it's relevant and the benefits exceed the costs. You probably won't be asked about the old framework going forward because it's now almost gone away forever. The previous framework said you should only recognize assets if they're probable. This says recognize all assets if faithful representation and relevance and benefits exceed cost. So that's the key message from that first part of the question. As I said, we probably won't be asked to contrast it with the old framework now. The old framework, though, said you recognize assets if they are probable. That was the first part of A. In the second part, again, it's saying, well, how was the old framework inconsistent with how was it inconsistent, again, with certain definitions in the standards? Again, the precise inconsistency compared to the old framework, again, probably isn't going to get asked again. But it's worth just pausing on those standards for a moment and saying, well, when do you recognize assets and liabilities under the two standards that are indicated? They ask us about IAS 12, deferred tax, and they ask us about IAS 37, again, in terms of provisions and contingencies and so on. So in deferred tax, you can sometimes get assets and sometimes you get liabilities. The question is, when do we recognize those assets and liabilities? So as far as deferred tax goes, we would recognize liabilities on all temporary differences. Assets would only be recognised if their recovery was probable. So there's an element of prudence, which is why we often don't recognise assets with losses. So that one there would be if the recovery of the assets was probable. If it's likely, they'll turn themselves into a tax benefit. When you think about provisions and contingencies, so contingent liabilities, contingent assets, things like that on the other side, we recognise liabilities if they are probable, or of course virtually certain. Can you see what a mess this is? We recognise assets, so let's say I'm being sued by a customer, so they will probably win, so I recognise a liability. I make a claim against my insurer. I will possibly again succeed. Again, would I actually then book the asset? Or probably, even if I could probably succeed, would I book the asset? No. IAS 37 says you only really recognise contingent assets if they're virtually certain. The message of that question then is that accounting is a bit of a mess. So we used to have a framework that said recognize everything if it's probable, which wasn't actually very consistent with the standards you can see here. Now we've got a new framework which doesn't really think so much about probability. It thinks about whether you could faithfully represent the asset, whether it's relevant to users, and whether benefits exceed costs. So the word probable or possible doesn't enter into it. But of course, that new framework is there to help standard writers in the future as standards evolve. Remember in the exam, if the framework tells you to do one thing and the standard tells you to do the other, which takes priority? Yes, it's the standard. The standard always takes priority. Question 4b is probably a very nice question. The only danger is if you hadn't left enough time to do it, because it's a question on revenue recognition, which everyone tends to learn properly. When you talk about the two requirements, the first requirement is about the theory that would be relevant to this scenario, and the second is then applying that theory to this particular situation. When you're talking in the first part about the principles, which is very much about the theory, I know the examiner at the teachers' conferences have said he gets fed up with people just writing out the 5 stages of the revenue recognition model, and that you should only write out the stages that are relevant. So I would say, look, if you did write them out, it's not the end of the world, but you need to be extremely careful with time allocation. So if you can see particular steps that are not relevant, just don't mention them. He thought that in this particular scenario, of the 5 stages, the ones that were most relevant were the first stage, about identify the contract. And the point there, of course, is that one of the things is that when you identify if there's a contract, you only book the contract if there is an expectation that you will get paid. And secondly, again, identify the performance obligations. Remember, these are the things that can be sold distinctly on their own. So sometimes when you go for fast food, they give you a price for a burger, a price for fries, and a price for the bundle. If you can buy this burger and fries separately, they're separate performance obligations. After you've explained the theory, and I think we would have no trouble there, secondly, applying it to the scenario where I would type or write 3 subheadings, because there are 3 issues. The first one is about the O inventory. The second is about the X inventory. And the third is a particular issue again with this customer that may not pay. So you've got this, I'll call them doubtful customer. Now, I don't think you'd have too much trouble arguing the answer to this question. The O inventory, again, the goods are not bundled together. They can be bought separately. So you can buy the hardware, the software, and the professional services separately. So you've probably therefore got, at the end of the day, again, 3 separate performance obligations. Again, the goods are not bundled. In the second scenario, which is the X inventory, the customer cannot use the hardware on its own. The hardware and the software, again, are bundled together and there's nothing you can do about it. So I think there are two separate performance obligations. So in the first contract, it's the hardware and the software and the support. In the second contract, there's a combined performance obligation, hardware and software, and then separately the support. In terms of the doubtful customer, even if you had no knowledge of IFRS 15, then you would get that right, I think, from common sense. So if the likely recovery is 80% of the amount, there's no point in booking more than 80%. So again, your most probable payment is going to be 80%. So again, that last sale, I'd recognise again at 80% of 3 million. That's the end of this debrief. I hope it's been of some help to you in thinking about the approach you should take to this wonderful exam. Goodbye.